Smooth, decadent, and a smart financial choice, the iconic product that is coffee has undoubtedly left a permanent mark on Puerto Rican culture. The impact of the industry itself wasn't merely the emergence of an economically fruitful product, though. It set the foundation for long-lasting social structures that subsequently rooted a sense of cultural identity. Starting in 1730 and extending until the present day, the coffee industry has provided work for Jibaros and other Puerto Ricans in the mountainous regions of the island, such as Lares, San Sebastián, and Yauco. Understanding the emergence of the industry is essential for learning the historical context and social development of Puerto Rico's people and economy, and therefore mustn't be overlooked. It should be noted that although the Puerto Rican coffee industry we know and love today may thrive and represent the people, this was not always the case. It underwent a strenuous journey from colonization to natural disasters before it became the iconic symbol of the island. According to historians, the coffee grain dates back to 850 CE, when Ethiopian ancestors of Oromo discovered it. However, the first credible evidence of its existence appears in the mid-15th century in the Sufi monasteries of Yemen, where it was first roasted and similarly prepared as today's coffee. Throughout the 16th century, coffee was spread throughout the Middle East and North Africa, granting the Arabs the chance to become some of the first to appreciate the plant. During this time, doctors, priests, and lawyers of the Quran believed that liquid coffee caused a lack of sleep, which made them declare coffee as an intoxicating beverage. Due to this declaration, coffee shops were banned and closed down. A couple of years later, coffee was introduced to the Spanish Empire and Italy, where it became an essential crop to the reigning kingdoms. After its introduction to the Caribbean and the Americas in 1730, coffee was introduced to Puerto Rico by La Real Compañía de Barcelonesa, which exported the crop from Puerto Rico to Barcelona, Spain. By the year 1768, the Spanish crown recognized the chance of economic growth that coffee could bring to the Caribbean islands and gave said islands a 5-year grace period over taxes. This meant that the colonists living in the islands did not have to pay for taxes as long as coffee was being produced well enough to sustain and grow the economy. In that same year, La Compañía del Asiento de Negros replaced La Compañía de Barcelonesa with the slave trade. From there, the coffee bean began thriving in the tropical weather and became a staple drink in the culture of the Spanish and islanders as the centuries went by. In 1870, coffee became a worldwide trading product benefiting Spain and its kingdom. This period allowed Puerto Rico to become a worldwide exporter of coffee beans and the 6th largest coffee exporter by the 1890s. On July 25, 1898, Puerto Rico was invaded by the United States and was declared as a territory. A year later, in 1899, Hurricane San Ciriaco passed by Puerto Rico and wiped out coffee plantations, causing automatic destruction in the economic wealth of Puerto Ricans. Due to the United States taking over, Puerto Rico had lost the ability to trade with other countries and export as they usually would to supply the island with basic necessities. Not only was trade affected, but the currency as well. Once the states took over, they devalued the Puerto Rican currency, which caused great debt in the economy of the island. With the United States colonizing the island and the effects of Hurricane San Ciriaco, the plantation lands became expensive for farmers to buy and maintain, which trickled down to the shortage of Puerto Rican coffee production. Despite pressures from Spain and the United States, coffee became one of the largest economic resources in Puerto Rico next to sugarcane. Even after the United States conquered the island and Hurricane San Ciriaco hit, Puerto Rican farmers still devoted their time to make the best out of the circumstances. Coffee production slowly began to rise once again and managed to become a contributing source to the economic factors, even if not as prominent as before. In 1896, Café Yaucono was first established and became one of the staple coffee brands in Puerto Rico. Nowadays, Café Yaucono, Café Rico, and Café Crema dominate 70% of the coffee production in the island. However, according to Café Real de Puerto Rico, the island imports its coffee when local production is low. Oftentimes, these imports could be illegal and reach the big roasters to then be sold as quote-unquote local coffee. Many of the big roasters make a mix of locally grown coffee and imported coffee and sell it in the market as local. With that said, the demand for rich local coffee has diminished because of large company owners. Even though these companies sell in large quantities, the Puerto Rican population enjoys, recognizes, and prefers the local coffee grown in the mountains. Due to the harsh weather conditions that Puerto Rico has faced, including Hurricane Irma and Maria, along with the earthquakes dated in 2020, the farming land has been greatly affected. Production has also been affected by the worker shortages across the island. However, the lack of bean pickers has not affected the farmers directly, according to them. According to the Perfect Daily Grind, 28% of the coffee consumed in Puerto Rico is locally grown. Currently, there's an estimate of about 37,425 acres of land dedicated to coffee plantations. In Puerto Rico, coffee has amounted to $206.6 million in revenue, which is 2.5% of the income that comes from farming. Even though its contribution to the economic stability of the island is small, local coffee shops have been popular amongst the towns. Many of these local shops buy their coffee from local farmers, which contributes to the local economy of the island. As mentioned by the Perfect Daily Grind, local coffee shops also provide job opportunities for baristas to sharpen their skills along with learning about the different types of coffee grown. The Puerto Rican barista team was created to educate shop owners, baristas, and roasters about coffee production and how to make it thrive once again in Puerto Rico. Similarly, customers unconsciously begin to learn about the history of coffee or at least become more familiar with quality coffee by visiting these local shops. The reliance that Puerto Rico had on coffee for its economic prosperity undoubtedly showed its effects through the way society began to function. At one point, the industry was quite fragile, causing tensions between the very groups that should have been working together as one. A prominent example of this in the flesh took place following the finalization of the Haitian Revolution in 1804. The influx of French immigrants from Haiti to Puerto Rico brought knowledge and strategies that ultimately improved the quality of coffee. In 1815, La Real Cédula de Gracia, a legal order under the government of Philip VII, began to indirectly encourage wealthy Europeans to exploit land and workers in Puerto Rico, rewarding them with privileges such as tax breaks and free trade. This newfound interest in the island grew coffee and sugar production. About 30 years later, in 1849, Capitán General Don Juan de la Pezuela began a system to maintain civil order. A ramification of the order was the Jornalero Law and subsequent Libreta regime, which essentially allowed for a captive labor force to survive under a name other than slavery. The law required all able-bodied 16-year-old males to work and carry a notebook with their registration numbers as well as a rundown of their hours. Failure to comply with expectations was punishable by law, and especially harmed those who did not know how to read and write. The practice did not come to an end until 1873 with the abolition of slavery, but by then, it had already created the foundation of the labor force. This newly established working class clashed numerous times with those above them. When the coffee industry was at its peak, the hegemony of the industry caused resistance between the workers and neighboring farmers. Despite the tough situations that followed and still occur presently, the coffee industry has provided Puerto Rico with a sense of unity and representation unlike any other. Think about it. If you were to ask just anyone what product comes to mind when they think of Puerto Rico, odds are they will say coffee in their answer. It is so representative of the islands that in 2015, contestant Casey Vargas wore a dress complete with coffee beans for the Miss World Beauty pageant, where she had to represent Puerto Rico. CEO of Café Salome, Evelyn Ramos, even goes as far as to say, quote, "Coffee in Puerto Rican culture is considered one of the basic needs at the level of water, milk, and bread."
Y realmente yo creo que el puertorriqueño que no tome café, pues como que carece de algo en la sangre, porque realmente venimos de tiempo tomando café y nuestro café llegó, ¿verdad? Como dicen por ahí en la historia, nuestro café llegó hasta el Vaticano, hasta el Papa lo llegó a probar, o sea, venimos de una cultura de un buen café.
It's something that people island-wide enjoy every morning. Going out for a cup of coffee with friends and family is a go-to activity that sparks joy and strengthens bonds between groups of people. The coffee bean has become more than just a fruitful product. It has become a symbol of persistence, unity, and nationalism. Coffee's influence is rooted in the economic development and processes perpetuated by the industry on the island throughout its history. After being brought over to the New World, the cash crop became a staple in every Puerto Rican's life. It was at their farming jobs and at their homes, and for some, it was a symbol of freedom and community. It is the drink of the working class, a drink everyone can enjoy, and it is produced locally. Today, The younger generations are the ones leading the charge to maintain coffee culture on the island. College-level individuals are devoting their lives to agriculture and the preservation of the product. There is nothing like the pride one feels when drinking coffee from one's own island, and that is something Puerto Ricans can do every day. From the cherries on the tree to our cups every single morning, coffee is an icon of Puerto Rican life and culture.